Robert King, present. Peter Bezade, present. Joan Mead,
Here.
present. Mary Comstock, present. Ed Torian, present. Paul Swenson, present. I've heard, Mr. Chairman, from Mary Cronin, who is ill tonight and will not be present. And I understand that our chairman is away on vacation.
In Italy,
Okay.
and I'm sure he's enjoying himself. He'd much rather be here, I believe. All things considered. Without objection, I'm going to ask that the secretary waive the reading of the minutes. If anybody objects, he will read them. I think, does everybody have copies of the minutes?
I just have a correction I'd like to make to the
Okay.
minutes from October 6th. There is a reference on item 5 of the minutes
Mhm.
to section 3-1. I would like to strike that. I think I made an error. It should just
Okay.
be the reference to 8-1, because of my
Okay.
typo.
Very good, thank you. Anybody have any other changes to the minutes? Being none, proceed with the meeting. Comments from the public? A public. Welcome, public.
Actually, I wasn't going to say anything tonight, and then I read your agenda, so I changed my mind.
Okay.
One thing I remember as I went home and watched the tape, you were talking about the Board of Ed and only having a few people on the ballot and how much it costs to run an election and everything. I hope you've figured out a way to solve it, but if you haven't, there's one way to solve it. Go back to the 2 years for everyone, and then look at this again in the future when people may have had more time to solve it. And two, I remember at some point we talked about term limits if the terms went up to 4 years, but I don't think you ever voted on it or seriously considered it. But if you have one mayor running every 4 years, he can be in 16 years and only have to actually run once or 4 times in that period of time. And I wondered if y'all would be willing to reconsider term limits since you've increased the term to 4 years. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Comments? First item on the agenda is regarding the election, staggered election of the school board. The issue came up at the last meeting when we changed the terms from 2 to 4 years for the rest of the elected officials. This presented some challenges with regard to the staggered school board election. I believe our attorney was going to look into the matter.
And indeed I did. Just so we're all on the same page, I'd like to pass out corrected versions of 2-2. That's the section dealing with elections
Okay.
and contains the language dealing with Board of Ed, of course.
Thank you.
And I made the corrections, I seem to have dropped V about 3 or 4 times in the text and added language dealing with the city clerk before we get on to the Board of Education. In 2-2A1D, on the second page, kind of towards the top of the page, because we're going to still have a city clerk for 2 years after the 2009 election, we didn't want to completely eliminate the reference to that title position, or position title, without adding some language, which you'll see underlined, the first underlining in the sentence beginning immediately, which says that immediately after the 2009 election, we'll start calling the city clerk by a different title. So those are the changes that you will see in this version. And as Chairman King
Here's
indicated,
his.
Thank you.
I had done some research on the subject of the Board of Education, had occasion to call.
Rick, before we leave the city
Yes.
clerk thing, just a question.
Yeah.
We're changing the title effective with the 2009 term.
Right.
We're not changing the structure of the job, meaning that's still an independent position because it was an elected position.
Correct.
So,
That's right. That's right.
so none of this wording.
The nature of the job being appointed doesn't occur until after that term,
Okay.
that 2009
Thank you.
term. the subject of Board of Education, I contacted the Secretary of State's office. And the first part of my conversation with Art Champlain in that office, been there quite some time and I've dealt with him in the past, concerned one of the possibilities that was discussed at the last meeting, namely shifting the election of Board of Education members to an even year cycle following the state election cycle. And that conversation didn't last very long because Arthur pointed out to me that the provisions of 9-164 doesn't permit it. This is a section of the state statutes talking about municipal elections, and it says there shall be held in each municipality biennially a municipal election on the first Monday of May or Tuesday after the first Monday in November in odd numbered years. So the idea of shifting to the state cycle was unpleasing to him. Even when I suggested that the possibility might exist of having all other local officials serve during and be elected during the biennial odd year cycles, and just shifting the Board of Education members to the even year cycle. His comment to me, very plain comment, was that the Secretary of State's office would oppose that. Okay. So that left us with, it appeared, two possibilities, other than the possibility of just remaining with the cycle that we have now. And those are sticking with odd numbered years and either not staggering, in other words, having all members of the Board of Education elected at the same time, and that's a conversation perhaps we should have in greater detail, or going with a staggering and having some Board of Education members standing alone in an alternating odd numbered year cycle. In other words, you'd stick with the 5-6 version that we have now, but during some years, only the Board of Education members would stand for election, and only a portion of them, 5 or 6, depending how we structure it. And to get back to the possibility of not staggering at all, Mr. Champlain indicated that this is what Hartford does now. In some odd-numbered years, only Board of Education members stand for election. I wanted to give you another section of the statutes. This is 9-206A, and this is a section that we appear to be under now. There are a variety of sections of the statutes dealing with boards of education, and all of them except for this one talk about boards consisting of either 3, 6, 9, or 12 members serving for either 2, 3, or 4 years. This is the only section that seems to contemplate a broader choice, for example, of 11 members. And the reason why I'm giving it to you is to show you the language. It's in, looks like the second sentence to me. Each such town may provide in an ordinance or charter provision for method of rotation. It was Mr. Champlain's, who by the way called me today, Commissioner King, as he had promised to do, to tell me that they had searched their records and found no conversation in their files dealing with staggering. And to share, although he hadn't done a search of legislative history, to indicate to me, as I already knew, that the language in that statute uses the permissive term may rather than the mandatory word shall. So it leaves open the possibility, should you choose to consider it, of not staggering.
Mm-hmm.
Which would be consistent with your 4-year concept and eliminate the possibility that in some years only Board of Education members would stand for election. So depending on how you choose to deal with this, we may want to revisit 2-6 dealing with vacancies which gets us into a conversation about whether those alternating odd years during a 4-year cycle might be useful to fill vacancies if they should occur. But I think I'm jumping ahead.
No.
You really have to grapple with what you want to do with the Board of Education. And there don't seem to be any perfect choices.
Well, it seems that the option of not having a staggered election for the Board of Ed would be, I think, a lower cost option and meet the requirements of having a municipal election. The question is, what is the rationale for the staggered election for the Board of Ed? Does anybody fill in any blanks?
Bob, and I don't want to speak out of turn about this. The Board of Ed is a very specialized body. They spend a lot of time doing what they're doing. I think that there's a long learning curve for that type of body. I mean, there's a lot of institutional knowledge there. And I think the staggered term is there so we don't lose all those people at the same time, so that there's an overlap of knowledge. They do all sorts of different things. I mean, they're very active now in expulsion hearings where they weren't 20 years ago. They're very active in all sorts of different issues that impact a variety of rules, procedures, state law, federal law, Board of Education policy. And I think that we are not in a situation without having input from the Board of Education itself and maybe the school system to kind of tamper with that structure. I really feel strongly about that. I think the cost of doing that and not doing it right would be far greater than the cost of holding a municipal election for just 5 members in terms of mistakes that the city might make or just not having enough knowledge people on a board continuously. I'd really be reluctant to tamper with that. And I've never served on the board, I should say that, but that's just my observation. It's too bad our chairman isn't here for his 2 cents.
Right. Thank you. Anybody else? Thoughts? Ed?
I'd have to concur with what Pete said. My years on the council, I was able to see that the Board of Ed members were really a group that, as he pointed out, they're dedicated, they're committed, and I think we'd be remiss if we were to tamper with something like that without having at least the benefit of their input.
Mary?
I agree.
Paul?
Yeah, I think that's the whole purpose of the staggered. I think that's pretty clear.
Joan, you have a thought?
No, I spent so much time online trying to figure out how other towns ran theirs, and some towns, like Stamford, has Board of Ed members elected for 3 years. Everybody else is a 4-year term. Board of Ed has 3-year terms. And I couldn't find anything in their website telling me how they manage this. But in another town's website, what they did was hold their elections, but the people didn't take office until the following year. So they were all elected at the same time, but some people had to wait until the following year to take office, so that's how they got around this staggered thing. Everybody ran at the same time, but some people's terms took office in an odd year, in the year after everybody else did, so they had.
So they faced with this
Yes.
small number of people in an election year?
But they were all, about half the size of our Board of Ed too, so.
Well, I know the chairman's thought about having a municipal election with only 5 people on it. He found that troubling. I would tend to agree with the other comments of Peter and the rest of my colleagues that continuity on this board would seem to be the thing that we would want to continue with. The other option, as I said, the chairman is troubled by that. We also have a key member who is not with us tonight, who certainly has experience with the school system. I would suggest we just table this and pick this particular subject up at the next meeting when we have a full board. There are other options that can be pursued on this. One was brought up, and that is to roll back to a 2-year term. But I think that, we've already voted on that, and the majority went with the change. If that's to be brought up again, then I would suggest that we wait until the chairman is back in and we have a full board, so the people can have a chance to vote on that.
I have a suggestion.
Sure.
This is a unique body, the Charter Revision Commission.
Mhm.
I have a view that it's designed for us to keep changing our mind as it goes along. I have that view because we're supposed to make some recommendations. At the end of it, have a public hearing, review the comments of the public hearing, perhaps change our minds, submit it to the city council. We get back from them and make possibly more changes. This to me seems like city government, all government, is not designed to be the most efficient. It's designed to allow access. It's designed to function with checks and balances.
Mhm.
And it's not, this is a cost of government, just as publishing an expensive newspaper is the cost of government. And I'm happy to leave this at 2 years. If after a public hearing, we change our minds, if this is a big issue, fine, we change our minds and we could change everything backwards again. If after it's sent back from the council, we change our minds, fine. But I'm sort of satisfied leaving this alone. So there will be an off-year municipal election, and perhaps only 5 people on the Board of Education will be there. But that's also an opportunity for the city to put on bond issues. It's also an opportunity to fill vacancies in other offices. I don't see it as a waste. I mean, I see this as part of government. And perhaps maybe we'll change our mind after the public hearing. Perhaps the council will review it and say, oh, we don't like this, and we'll change our mind then. So, I'm content to leave it as it is and make that decision today.
How does the rest of you feel about it? You want to make a motion to the effect that we leave it, the term as it is? Or, I guess we really will address that in the vacancy area, right? We're talking about the biannual election process. That was another item we were supposed to be taking out.
Yes, 2-6
2-6.
is
And that would,
tied into this.
and that would cover what Peter is suggesting.
It very well could, yes.
Okay. We don't need a motion on this because it's in existence.
It's in
now.
existence now. I don't propose we change anything. I'm just saying we take no action at all, leave it alone, we leave the Board of Ed out of it. And, that may be unacceptable to some people, but that's just, I kind of knew this was going to happen when we were voting on the 4-year terms. We're going to rub up against some statutes that don't work well.
I don't object to that, Peter, and if everybody is in agreement, we'll go that way, but I would ask for 100% agreement on this. Otherwise, there's 2 people missing that are key to this process, and I'm just trying to be respectful of their opinions. Shall I see a show of hands, everybody in favor of making no change and leaving it 2 years? I would suggest we shelve it until next meeting. We can always deal with this in a report, Peter, because we've got 1 member that's not in favor and we've got 2 others absent. But I would agree with your proposal. The next item, the vacancies, which I think probably is going to take care of this anyway, if we agree with that.
It may. Last meeting, I handed out a copy of a document that says 4-year terms, vacancies at the top. It's 2-6.
Mhm.
You should have it in your packet.
Right.
And this was before we had made the decision, you had made the decision to go to a 4-year term. I was prepared prior to that time.
That sounds like you're making it.
And you'll recall that this is language that says that the common council is to fill vacancies within 40 days. And one of the things that I'd like you to at least consider at some point is whether or not 40 days is a good time frame. Because in my experience with the common council, it sometimes happens that it takes longer than 40 days. But then it goes on to say that the council, when the council appoints someone to fill a vacancy, that appointment lasts for the unexpired portion of the term, and then have this anomalous language in the charter which says, or until the next biennial election. Well, since the Board of Education is excluded from this whole concept, that didn't make much sense, because the unexpired portion of the term would always be until the next biennial election. So I propose that you delete it. I proposed that you delete it. But Commissioner Buzade thought that maybe that was worth more of a conversation than I had suggested, because if we're going to a 4-year term, then perhaps it's appropriate to fill vacancies by appointment only until the next biennial election. Not, for example, if you have a vacancy that occurs in year 1, it might be wise to just make that appointment really good for 1 year until the next biennial election, so that an elected position retains its elective character. So, I guess that's a long way around saying, maybe this deletion that I propose in here is a bad idea, and we should retain the language of 2-6 as stands now. Might not have made sense when you have a 2-year term, but it does make sense when you have a 4-year term, or it might make sense.
Thanks for summarizing that argument.
Happy to help.
I think that, you know, if we're gonna have a 4-year term, and if we're stuck with an interim 2-year election cycle anyway, that we could make use of it in the event there are interim appointments, so that nobody can go more than 2 years without being elected for any office when there's a vacancy. If you're gonna have an election anyway, you might as well use it for other things. That would be my preference, that we do that. Sure, you know, if it's a council person and the board, it's just the council person and the Board of Ed, I'm sure it's not gonna be a well-attended election, but at least the public's gonna be able to have some input, and at least that person goes before the public. It's not just an appointment.
So, should we vote on, we've already voted this language in, right,
No,
No,
last time?
no.
No,
we
this
we
was
tabled
stuff
it
that
on
we
my request.
questioned.
Tabled it,
Right.
okay. You're very wise, Peter.
I don't know about that.
So, we don't have to take any action on this one to keep it in?
Well, wouldn't we still have to change the language?
Only
From whatever
language we-
cause shall be filled within, well, we talked about
Oh,
whether 40 days.
40 days, that we could change
And we
that.
talked
We're gonna have that
about
conversation.
possibly being 60. By appointment by the common council, do we need to change that for the unexpired portion of the term?
Well, it says for the unexpired portion of the term or
Or
until
until.
the next biennial municipal election. I think that what
My point would be,
Is the "or" saying it can be either way? Or
Whichever
is this
sooner.
"or"
whichever
meaning?
sooner.
whichever's earlier.
Okay. Okay.
So the only
So
debate
we
we would
just
have is
leave
whether
it.
to change, in my way of thinking, the only discussion we would have, if you agree with my view, would be whether it's 40 days, 50 days, or 60 days. And
Mhm.
it should be some period of time. I would think 40 days would be enough to take a poll and fill a vacancy normally.
Isn't there, depends on when this vacancy would fall, whether or not it has to go before a common council, right? So if it fell in the middle of a month, they would have one meeting before they'd have to appoint it. Whereas if we extended it to 60 days, it would be 2 common council meetings that would come in front of.
I think that's why we decided to go with the 60. We talked about going to 60 because I don't think they usually fill them within,
They do that.
no. So,
I have a question. Is it calendar days or business days?
Good question.
When not otherwise specified as calendar days.
So we could change it to business days and do more.
You know,
Yeah.
Good.
But it's been your experience that the 40 days is too short.
I think every effort's made to fill a vacancy within 40 days, and sometimes not enough.
And the 20 days will make a difference.
I think that gives them 2 council meetings.
And that's
it
enough.
should be sufficient. I'm not guaranteeing, I don't think anybody can,
No, no.
that it will work in every case, but it'd be better.
To Mary's point, is the rest of the language in the charter refer to calendar days or business days? Is there any language in here that says so many days?
I don't recall any reference to business days.
Okay. You okay with calendar days? I hear a motion that, are we satisfied with the 60 days?
fine.
Anybody like to make a motion, we change it from 40 days to 60 days?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, shall we vote? Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Before we leave this section, I want to draw your attention to one other source of trouble, potential source of trouble. And this may have been covered in our correction effort, but if it wasn't, I think it'd be a simple thing to resolve. If you take a look at that line through section, it says, such person shall take office the first Monday following his election. That doesn't happen. Recall that in 2-2B, it says terms of all municipal officers shall commence at 12 noon on the first business day in December, following their election. So I would suggest that we say, and such person shall take office in accordance with the provisions of 2-2B of this charter.
Instead of the first Monday.
Right. Or am I wrong here?
No, I think you're right.
It certainly is not the first Monday after an election in November.
That's correct.
That's gotta be bad.
Are we leaving the rest of that language in, and just to clarify my own mind, this, that you have lined out, we're not taking that out?
Right.
All right.
So we need a motion to vote on that change.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Motion to change the language, what is the specific language again, Rick?
I want to see it written out, typed out, but I'm thinking what it should say is, and such person shall take office, that's already in there, in accordance with the provisions of section 2-2B hereof. Let me just make sure
Say
that's
it again,
correct.
in accordance with
The provisions of section 2-2B, that's capital B, hereof. 2-2B. Yeah.
Capital B.
Capital B.
Two. Any discussion? Change the language?
We need a motion.
Just a
Oh, I thought you made a motion, and seconded.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Any discussion, Joan?
Anyone else? Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. We'll change that section.
Great.
That's all we have to do on 2-6.
Yes, sir.
Peter, I think that leaves the option for the school board now.
Excuse me?
I think that leaves the option for the school board, what we were talking about earlier.
That's correct.
Okay, for the biennial election.
That's correct.
Okay, moving right along. Item number 4, and that is the language on bonding. And Peter, I believe you and Rick were to reword the handout that was given to us last week.
Yes. Attorney Gottschalk did revise it. I did look at it. I believe it was much clearer in my mind, and I was satisfied with his revision, which is about to hand off to you.
Not that there was anything wrong with the first language. No, I'm just kidding. This is much clearer.
It was very clear.
Pleased to report.
Talk to me later.
And when you're gonna get them,
Gotta get the extras. Okay, there you go. Thank you.
hold on, till you get mine.
Everyone have a chance to read that?
Yes.
The change? Any discussion?
I believe that this is much more specific and clearer in my mind and does what I think our intent was when we adopted those changes to this section.
Anyone else? Do we need a motion to change the language? Can I hear a motion to accept the?
I would move that we accept the language submitted by council as to our revisions to section 7-10A of the charter.
Second?
Second.
Okay, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So passed. I have one question with regarding this, and it's, if I can propose it to both our attorney and to the commissioners. When we were talking about bonding and these caps and limits, recall the conversation we had about the parking authority. Did we decide not to do anything with regard to that? My understanding was that the parking authority, we changed the language in their bonding, that they can bond without going to public referendum. But if they come to the common council and ask for a good faith backing of the city, then in effect, the city takes on this liability in case of a default. Is that correct?
Yes, we'll be back on the full faith and credit of the city.
Right. Would that fall under the provision of this bonding cap then? That if it were in excess of $5 million, or $2.5 million, I guess, it would have to go to public referendum?
It's an absolutely fair question.
Let me be sure I'm positioning the question correctly. With this change,
Yeah.
does this make them do that, or would, if we wanted to change it, we would have to change language in order for that to take effect?
Well, if I recall the language of the special act that was adopted in 1984 correctly, it says that even when the common council backs a proposed bond issue with its full faith and credit, that's not subject to referendum.
It is not.
That's my recollection of the language. And so I think you could argue that in order to read this language, that in order to read these two sections of law in a way that's consistent, you'd have to give some, I don't know how you come out with that, to tell you the truth. I was going to say that you'd have to still retain both. You have to somehow give meaning to both. So that means that the decision, here's the problem. Suppose the borrowing proposed by the parking authority is the borrowing that triggers the 5 million.
Exactly.
That's exactly the point Commissioner King is making.
Yeah, it doesn't matter whether it comes as the first 2.5 million, let's say, or the second 2.5
That's
million.
correct. That's,
I
but I
don't
think
know.
that's his point.
I got it, and I don't know what the answer to that is. You
So
know,
by
that's
accepting
the
this,
kind of question, you get 3 lawyers in a room, you get 5 answers.
I didn't think it was that simple.
Right. I don't know. It's a good question. I
well-
think you'd have to analyze the specific language of that special act.
I think you really have to analyze the language of the proposed ordinance.
Right. And this language in here. So I'm just wondering, when we set this, Peter, if in effect that trigger also applies to parking authority. and-
Only when the council acts on the parking authority finding. I don't think they normally do.
Okay, you're right. Okay, if they ask for good faith backing.
That's
then-
correct. It's a
then it
whole
would.
different thing. I mean, they don't normally do that. The parking authority issues their own.
They just go out and bond.
That's correct.
Okay, so we're okay with this change that we made in 710, as long as the parking authority doesn't ask for good faith backing. And then if they do, then they would fall under the provision of this.
I think if that should occur, Corporation Counsel's Office will render an opinion about whether or not 7-10A is triggered. And sitting here tonight, I think it would be foolhardy to try and give you an answer. Because I don't know what it would be.
I was just thought,
I think you make a legitimate, straight-faced argument for both positions.
and maybe that's the way it should be, right, Peter? Thank you. Is there any other business to be discussed?
A couple of handouts if you want.
Wonderful. We always look forward to handouts.
I know you do. 311. This is one you voted on last time, referendum percentage, so I wrote it up. Just so you have a copy in your file. So you're up to date on that. And I have one more.
This was reduced to 10%.
I'm sorry, Len, I keep making you get up.
That's
I
I
bet.
have one more, and that is just to clean up the page that I had given you before on city clerk that now has been changed because we added that language about the title changing immediately following the 2009 election. So this should replace your earlier version. But it furnishes no business for you tonight.
We already passed this.
Correct.
311, so we don't have to vote on that, and we don't have to vote on this other one, right?
That's correct.
So we're all set. Is there any other business to be discussed for the commission? This is gonna be the shortest meeting in history.
Well, before we adjourn, just so we're clear, we did pick a date for a proposed public hearing.
Right. On December the 8th. We were going to have a draft for available November 10th. Now, the unfinished portion of business is this the school board thing. Does that interfere with you having a draft? Can we?
Oh, draft sounds like it's just an interim
Draft.
thing. So if the draft gets revised, I think that's a tragedy.
Okay.
Can you, date again, when the draft is due? What's our next meeting?
November
the
10th.
10th.
November 10th.
That's when the draft was going to be due.
Okay.
And then we were gonna have the public hearing on December the 8th, and then a final draft to be submitted to the common council on December the 29th. So our target date is December the 29th, really, to have the draft to the common council. If need be, as we discussed today, Rick, we can hold a special meeting if we have something that's needs to be resolved in the interim.
So just so I've got it right, the draft for the 10th of November, public hearing on the 8th of December.
Right, and the meeting of the 24th, we hope to be able to, release that meeting and just cancel that. But if we need it, we can. I think the chairman said that, he's gonna hold that as an option, but he would like not to have that meeting if possible. So,
I have a question. When we advertise the public hearing, we don't include the draft changes to the whole charter, do we, in the legal notice? It wasn't
I think
clear.
you have copies on file.
We have copies on file,
But
and
the notice that appears in the
it
paper.
does not require that. I didn't think so. Okay.
is a draft report gonna be available to the public then?
Yes.
Before the
Yes.
meeting? That'll be what, here in City Hall?
Yes.
Okay.
We don't have to put it online, do we?
Why not?
I mean, the draft report, we should put that online too.
How would people really be able to access it? I mean, it would make
You
no
know-
sense.
It's likely that it will appear online because it'll be part of your minutes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Any other business? Question?
No?
I just had one other question on the terms of office thing. When you talked to Secretary of State's office, did they mention any other towns or cities besides Hartford?
No, I asked him specifically if he was telling me that, that all towns stagger, although there's no statutory authority for requiring it, and that's correct. And the one that he thought was closest to the direction we appeared to be going was Hartford.
Okay, because when I was going through all these cities and towns trying to find out if they did staggered elections, some apparently did and others seemed like they just held their elections and did not stagger the terms. And I was just trying to find
know,
some specific examples.
I didn't
Of
ask him
how
to put it in writing.
Okay.
I didn't want to seem anything but appreciative.
Mm-hmm.
But what he indicated to me was that they would know, because people have to file their ballots.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been there a long time, and he asked the guy who's been there longer, and the answer he gave me was, yes, he'd know, and he was unaware of it. I didn't ask the follow-up question, and did you actually go through all those ballots for 169 towns, and no cross-examination.
Well, I think, Joan, that it seems to make sense that we keep this language in the charter that allows for elections, 2 years. It
Right,
seems
I was
like
just-
five is troubling to folk, and it is to me too. But as Peter pointed out, keeping it open, because there could be bonding, could be other
Mhm.
things, vacancies is certainly another issue we have to deal with, so maybe it may not be as bad a deal as we first thought. I mean, you certainly know the polls, you work the polls, and
Mhm.
the logistics of holding an election for 5 people is not something that you would like to do, but the other options, I think, maybe are not palatable either. If there's no other business, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
What are you gonna do for the rest of your hour? Go next door. Go next door.
Short meeting.
Good job.
Thank you.
Get along.
Probably next door.
Well,
Yeah.
I think we've done a lot of our work.